Hello and welcome. You are watching world's biggest coverage of the invasion war in Ukraine. I am Rajesh Pawar, and joining me on this broadcast are Maria Pysarenko and Serhii Mirankov. Over the next half an hour from the ground, we will bring you unparalleled stories from the war zone.
Three war reporters, one unmissable broadcast. Heart-stopping stories of war from ground. Putin's war continues to bleed Ukraine. Civilians and children, no one spared. Ukraine bloodbath.
It's day 23 of the Russian invasion, and the attacks on the Ukrainian cities continue. Cruise missiles hit the city of Lviv, causing significant damage. Kharkiv, Kyiv, and Mariupol continue to be in the eye of the storm. Here's the report.
Markets on fire, explosions around airports, charred residential buildings. Ukraine is bleeding profusely as Russia continues its onslaught. From Kyiv to Mariupol, every city paints a picture of destruction and devastation. Once brimming with life and crowded streets, one of the largest markets of Eastern Europe, Barabashovo is on fire after Russian airstrikes. Some explosions were reported around the city of Lviv in western Ukraine. At least 3 blasts were heard in the city. The Lviv mayor claims that 6 Russian cruise missiles were fired at his city. The target, areas around the airport.
The Russian plan has been to increase their ground offensive in the east and south of Ukraine, and at the same time, they would keep pressure on Ukraine by bombarding cities in the west, including Lviv and Ivano-Franko area. So this is just a part of that strategy.
In Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, a raging fire was seen engulfing a building after non-stop shelling. Plumes of smoke continue to billow for hours.
Зараз ми знаходимося на Виноградарі. Прилетів снаряд, ми бачимо велику воронку. Що жахливо, що поряд знаходиться дитячий садок, з цієї сторони знаходиться школа.
Bombardments on residential buildings have caused a lot of...
I'm Kyiv right now, and I'm in the center of Kyiv. I'll just turn my camera around to show you around. It's absolute quiet here, silence like nobody lives here. This is the center of Kyiv, the heart of Kyiv city, and Kyiv is the heart of Ukraine. Absolute silence, no noise whatsoever, hardly any people around, hardly any traffic around, total quiet.
Stories of loss, devastation and despair on the streets of Ukraine's capital continue to beam out. But Ukraine's resilience continues to be the main picture. Fighting back against the Russian onslaught by shooting down their helicopters and air missiles. In Kherson in South Ukraine on the Black Sea, locals refuse to take handouts from Russian troops in an open act of defiance.
Our Mariupol, our Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Kyiv region, Izium, all our hero cities are in very difficult situations. We are doing everything, all of us. Absolutely. Our army, police, SES, humanitarian convoys, church, all our people. We will not leave you. We will not forgive them. You will be free. Definitely, I know it. Like all of us on our land.
Слава усім нашим героям. Слава Україні.
23 days and counting. It's not just military establishments, but Russia seemed to be now targeting schools, hospitals, theaters, and civilian residential areas. With Rajesh Pawar in Kyiv, Bureau Report, India Today.
As Russia continues its onslaught, what is the Ukrainian president planning?
Thank you, Rajesh. Ukrainian President Zelenskyy is trying to keep up the motivation of his nation high for fighting the Russian troops. From meeting the injured civilians, the soldiers, to remaining defense on his demands. Zelenskyy doing all that he can. Here is more on this story.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the man of the hour, keeping the Ukrainian fighting spirit high, is motivating fellow citizens to protect the integrity of the country. The people's leader Zelenskyy on Thursday visited a family of injured civilians who suffered from shelling in Warsaw city.
Так? Тобто ми оккупировали TikTok?
The Ukrainian president also met personnel of State Emergency Service to thank them for their dedication. Ukrainian cities are reeling under the constant bombardment by Russian hellbirds. But people of the country have refused to bow down. As talks take place, Zelenskyy has made his demands clear. He wants the war to end, with security guarantees and sovereignty. He wants to ensure Ukraine's territorial integrity with real protection of Kyiv. The results of the talks will depend on how much Ukraine and Russia are willing to yield. Bureau Report, India Today.
The global pressure is mounting on Putin, and the further isolation of Russia is also increasing with each passing day. Maria breaks it down for us.
Thank you, Serhii. The Ukrainian president has named Russia a terrorist state, while the US president has labeled Putin a war criminal. Now, the big question is, with the International Court of Justice ruling to stop the war, will Russian troops pay any heed to the verdict?
Till a day ago, this theatre in Mariupol was shelter to hundreds of people, including several children. Today, their fate is unknown. Bombed by Russian forces, the theatre is now a pile of rubble, with parents and children trapped inside. Continuous bombing by Russians has hampered the rescue efforts. Satellite pictures of the theatre taken before the attack showed a message, children, written on their joining grounds, to tell Russians it was a civilian shelter. But it evidently did not stop them. Their advance in Ukraine delayed by days, Russian forces have taken to pounding civilian targets. Markets, makeshift shelters, residential buildings, parents queuing up to buy bread. Nothing and nobody seems to be safe anymore. It's ironic, the tanks and talks are moving parallelly. While the two countries claim to be making progress in negotiations, there is no breather in the battles being waged on the ground. This market in Kharkiv is among the many civilian establishments bombed by the invaders.
The Russian state has become an outspoken terrorist, and it's not ashamed, but it will be responsible for everything that without the recognition of Russia as a terrorist state.
Russia suffered a major setback at the International Court of Justice on Wednesday. The ICJ has ordered Russia to suspend all its military operations and ensure that no military units supported by Kremlin takes further steps in the war. The court also asked both the nations to refrain from any action that may lead to escalation. So far, Russia has ignored the verdict, and Ukraine's Western allies are fuming.
Did you ask me whether I was called? Oh, I think he is a war criminal.
Will you be meeting with?
Ukraine is badly bruised, but is taking all the blows on the chin and fighting back. A quick resolution to the war will depend on how fast the two warring neighbors can agree on compromise. Bureau Report, India Today.
Ukraine is alleging genocide after Mariupol theater sheltering hundreds of civilians was struck by Russia. The theater was being used as a bomb shelter. Residents are now fleeing, with several corpses still being buried under the ruins.